Hi, friends. Welcome to another episode of Soaring Through Chaos. And again, the reason we do this is because we all agree we're going through some challenging times as a collective, and it's hard to say where we're going. Every day there's something different, whether it's to do with healthcare, whether it's to do with losing the risk of losing friends or family, or losing jobs. There's so much divisiveness that has come out of all this. And at the same time, because many of us are out of our comfort zone, as therapists and doctors would say, there's an opportunity for all of us to grow. There's an opportunity to listen to each other. And one of the people I met many years ago talking about compassion and other things was Dr. Lesa Walker. Somehow we became friends thanks to Project Happiness. And Randy Turan, I think, connected as the founder of Project Happiness. And I was visiting Austin from the electronics industry, and I had the great joy of meeting Dr. Lesa Walker almost 10 years ago, isn't it?
Yes,
So,
I think that's about right.
so Lesa, tell us a little bit about you. I remember meeting in Austin, Texas, and you had done a lot of work internationally as well, served in many countries. Could you tell us a little bit about your journey into compassion and how all that happened?
Okay, well, I worked for many years in the public health area. I'm a public health preventive medicine physician. So I worked in Texas at the state level for most of my career. And I focused on children with disabilities and their families and developing service systems for them. And one of the things I enjoy really is looking at how people connect, how services connect in new ways, and that we can work by working together, we can solve problems and have innovation just by seeing things slightly differently and putting people together who might not know each other. So that was a real pleasurable experience in my work. And of course, I'm very passionate about children and families, and especially children with disabilities. So that was fantastic. And I was working very hard at that position for many years. And then I thought, well, I'd love to do things, just creative things. So I decided to retire or semi-retire, really, just stop that position with the state. And that freed me up. I still worked, but I worked as a consultant in the same area. And then I was able to just think up things. And one of the things I wanted to do was engage people in practices that would really make the world a better place. And so how do we do that? And I thought, well, you have to actually do things in your life that establish habits. And so you actually change your lifestyle. So I dreamed up something that I thought would be fun to do with youth and actually people of any age. And it was focusing actions and taking your attention every day and focusing it. And at the beginning, I focused in the three areas I described as actions for peace, actions for green living or sustainability, and then actions for health. So those were the three areas that I wanted people to take positive action in. And I thought the mass effect would be if we all engaged, if we all had habits and we all were changing our lives in a very progressive manner, strengthening those actions each day, the world would actually become a better place. So I started for fun just piloting some programs and ways of getting children involved in those kinds of activities. And I developed this project around it, worked in some school pilots and things. And I ended up actually taking the program also to Kenya, where I was connected with a Roots and Shoots program. Jane Goodall, Roots and Shoots, the director there for Kenya. I was able to go and connect with him and some students there. But anyway, what happened is, as I was doing a lot of outreach, and that's probably how we met in terms of Project Happiness, I was trying to engage people and groups that I thought were just aligned in this regard. So I actually entered a Stanford competition on technology around compassion.
Yeah,
and how
I remember that.
how to
Yes.
develop an app and things like that. So I am not of that background, but I still went and tried to develop some plan that I thought would adapt what I was doing into the framework of compassionate action. And it wasn't hard because all of that is compassionate action. So I coined the phrase 3D compassion, which is three dimensions of compassion. And those being others, self, and the earth. So how do you care for others? How do you care for yourself? How do you care for the earth? Those are three interdependent and very important dimensions that make the whole of compassion. And I wanted to specify the dimension of the earth because often compassion, when people bring that word to mind, they don't necessarily think of compassion for the earth. They may think of caring about other people, and sometimes hopefully they think about how they take care of themselves. But the earth is on occasion a missing component. More and more now, it's definitely part of the whole. But early on, it wasn't as mentioned as much. So that was very important to me. And so anyway, that did connect me ultimately with the Charter for Compassion, because the executive director of the Charter for Compassion at that time, and still is, Marilyn Turkovich, saw my proposal for the app. My app did not get selected as a winner at all, or actually it wasn't an app, it was the proposal for one. But she liked the idea and she connected, and that's how things happen, you know. I talked with her and started volunteering in the world of compassion with the Charter for Compassion, and then also with another organization closely aligned with the Charter called the Compassion Games. And the Compassion Games sort of lined up a little bit more exactly with what I was trying to do with youth and people, and getting them engaged in compassionate actions in the three dimensions, and those translating into peace and sustainability and health. And so all of it worked. So I had a great time working and volunteering with them, and still am very closely aligned and connected because as I was working at that international level with their organizations, which their organizations are global, I realized there's a Compassionate Cities campaign, and I am living in Austin, Texas, and there's a lot of compassionate action going on here. We're a very dynamic city, and there's over 6,000 nonprofits. So if you can imagine, there's a lot of things happening that are very compassionate. But we had not taken that step to sort of designate formally and highlight that we wanted to aspire to be a growing and more compassionate city. So I thought I needed to walk my talk locally as well as what I was trying to do internationally. So I did launch the effort to establish Austin as a compassionate city. And to back up a little bit from that, though, what I found very interesting in the practice of positive actions in the three dimensions, others, self, and earth, are very impactful. I wanted to, again, personally experience what I was saying was good for everybody, right? So I actually, in my life, on a daily basis, every day for 2 years, I intentionally sought out and did actions, positive actions in those three dimensions. And I journaled about it every day. So every day for 2 years, I journaled three actions in each one of those dimensions. And what I learned from that experience was that the three dimensions are definitely almost one and the same. They when you take an action for the earth, you're taking an action for yourself, you're taking an action for others, and it all is very evident when you put tangible meaning to it. When you actually see the action you take and you go, oh, well, yeah, I'm categorizing it over here because that was sort of my intention when I did it, but look how, it affects everything. So that was one takeaway from that journey. And the other was the takeaway that, which I think is very important for all of us, and especially in this time we're in, is how an action taken, a simple action taken, with intention of caring, caring about others, yourself, or the earth in that way, leads to so many possibilities and growth in your life. And they can be very, very simple things that most people would discount as being not very much. Like, oh, I only did this, or something like that. And an example I like to share is that one day I was sitting in a coffee shop, or a little cafe actually, and I was having tea. But I was looking and I thought, well, I need to keep alert. That's one thing, is oftentimes so much passes us by. We let life be, we're very passive, and things just roll by. We don't even notice. So being attentive and being intentional about your day is what it taught me as well. So I was looking around thinking, well, I need to have an action today on, I think it was peace I was thinking about at the time, or others. And I was looking out the window of the cafe, and a truck drove by, and a van, and it had on the side a painted sign said, "Comfort the Children International." And I noticed it because sometimes, a lot of cars pass by, and if you're not thinking about things, you can let things just slide. Well, I intentionally looked really hard and made sure I remember the name, and I said, okay, my action today is going to look up that what that means, what that sign has to do with anything. So the action I took was I went home, looked it up on the internet, found out it was an organization in Austin, and they had a sort of a sister city in Kenya that they supported, and there was mutual support and growth between the two cities, and a wonderful organization. So I said, oh, this is fantastic. I learned something new. I didn't know they were there. And I also happened to like their page on Facebook just because I wanted to stay tuned to what they were doing. And that was it. That's all I did. That's it. Didn't think about them again, really, for a while. And a month or so later, they posted on Facebook and they said, hey, we're having a last call for anyone who wants to go to Kenya and teach art to high school students. So I saw that and I went, oh, well, my action for today will be to respond to them and say, hey, let's set up a meeting and talk. Why not? I want to learn more about what you're doing. So anyway, so I took that action that day. Anyway, all that led to me going to Kenya and teaching art to high school students with their group. So I had no thought when I was in the cafe sipping my tea about going to Kenya and teaching art to high school students. But the point is that, and that was a very rich and rewarding and wonderful experience. And so the journey of the 2 years was very life affirming and very much also impressed upon me how our actions really matter and they make life meaningful. And if you deciding what you do with your day is very important, whether or not you change the world. Each of us has a life to live, and so that's the bottom line. You can care about other people and the earth, or you can, lead a life that's perhaps more destructive on others or yourself. Or the earth, and it's a choice we make, and it can be very hard depending on your circumstances, but it's very worthwhile at the end of your life, in my mind, to look back and say, how did you decide to live? And those actions, be they small or large, are very important. So anyway, that was that journey. So then it circled in, like I said, to the arena and the area of compassion, and people focusing on that. And so then the Compassionate Cities movement. And so I founded Compassionate Austin. We had an Austin City Council resolution establishing Austin as a compassionate city, but then that's a piece of paper. So what does that end up really meaning and translating into? And there's a lot of non-compassionate stuff going on in Austin. So it's not designating us with a blessing that all of a sudden magically we're a compassionate city and nothing's wrong. It's a aspirational goal that, again, if you set that forward and that intention, that's more likely for you to pay attention and be attuned and try to strive toward that. So that's what it is in paper. And then how it translates into action is through all the amazing organizations and activities going on in Austin that we try to pull people toward. We try to highlight and bring a very inclusive environment to say that we all are compassionate Austin. Every single person, every single part of this city is part of that movement. And no one's excluded from that. It's your own choice that might exclude you from that intention. So we highlight and signal out and try to share out all the opportunities there are, as many as we can highlight, to join in and contribute time and effort and energy to making our city more compassionate. So that's the goal there. And so I still work very much in that, and sort of in the infrastructural hub, but actually the hands-on is everyone in the city doing their thing, and how we can shed light on that and bring people into that. The other thing was, in that process, I wanted to have another opportunity for people to engage in compassionate action. So design thinking is a very intriguing concept behind a lot of ways people design products, service systems, and so there's an IDEO in San Francisco had started the human-centered design construct, about how it's so important for things that we design that they start at the root of empathy with the user, and that you have to understand what the person wants and needs in order to design something that's that they will utilize and that they will benefit from. So they have a platform called Open IDEO, which is design thinking for social good. And again, there's chapters of Open IDEO. So I wanted to be the first city to mash up, so to speak, a compassionate city with an Open IDEO chapter. So I started the Open IDEO Austin chapter, and Open IDEO puts challenges, social challenges, out on the platform. And so the chapter's role is to try to engage people in the community in designing and innovating around those challenges and trying to bring solutions to them through creative means, and engaging people, obviously, and learning a lot from people, trying to understand situations and how best to design to address them. So that was a fun and very rewarding experience with the Open IDEO chapter. I have sort of passed the baton on because I did that, and I like to see new growth. So that is in the hands of some new organizers. We tend to pass the baton on with the Open IDEO chapters. But again, they have chapters globally, as does the Charter for Compassion. And so I was lucky to attend a summit of the Open IDEO chapter leaders that was held in San Francisco, and it was just fantastic. I can't say enough about it. It's one of those life experiences where you come away and you know you've been changed for the better. Met wonderful people, and that's the exciting thing, is surrounding yourself with people who really care can be very motivating and energizing. So that's the story. Next phase, I guess, of me has somewhat to do with this pandemic, but I have been really moving strongly toward a lot of focus on the environmental issues, because I think those are the most important issues of our time, because if we don't have care for the place we're inhabiting, we're not going to have a place, and that everything else will be mute. So I think it's really critical too that we all focus attention, a lot of attention and action, on helping with the environment and climate change and global warming and all the threats we have to our very existence on the earth, and the very existence of all other things, innocent animals and plants, etc., and the air and the water. So for me, compassion for the earth has taken a big leap in my day-to-day. So that brings me up I guess, closer to the time of the pandemic. So that's kind of the whole story up to there.
Wow, wow. I realize we haven't talked in ages. And this is a great way of catching up. And you know what? You reminded me of so many things, Dr. Walker. First, that this idea that when we are doing good for ourselves, and somehow it's separate from doing good for others. That's so not true. In fact, there was one teacher who was asked, "How do I improve my relationship with others?" And his answer was very paradoxical. He said, "There are no others. There are no others." I mean, we are relationships. I mean, we are the relationship is not with somebody else, but our opinion about them or our thoughts about them. All these divisions are so almost superficial, isn't it? And
Oh, yeah.
I just realized how many organizations I used to track at one time. And what's amazing is you've actually worked with all of them, whether it was Project Happiness, where we met and you extended your hands and you said, "I'm available," and you did some work around Project Happiness and Compassionate Circles in Austin. I remember that vaguely, but also the Center for Compassion at Stanford, where I was engaged, and Compassionate Cities, and people like Caroline Clark, who've been working in Sweden and many other parts of the world. Also, IDEO and Idea Labs in San Francisco, and the whole sustainability movement.
Yeah.
Like Mother Gaia is no separate from us. We are fed by the earth, and we can't separate out the health of the earth from our own health. And we are seeing that actually playing it out. So that raises a puzzling question in my mind. Many of the things that you said kind of, the person who invented the term black swan, Nassim Nicholas Taleb, when he was asked, did he see the black swan, the pandemic as a black swan event? He said, absolutely not. Black swan events are those that are extremely low probability events. He said, no, because this was a high probability. In other words, the probability of things going out of control was pretty high because we were not taking care of the environment and we were just too focused on ourselves. What do you think about that? Because you've been studying and meditating on these things deeply, contemplating on them for many years now. Did you also feel that something would go out of control so soon? Did you feel that? And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, definitely. I think we are not paying attention to what we need. Human beings aren't paying attention to as much to what we need to be paying attention to. And for those reasons, when you don't, I've been in public health and preventive medicine, and it's a very hard field sometimes to be in because prevention is not a natural state or a natural action. People tend to wait until they're really forced into something or something really hits them in the face and they go, oh, now I see it. It's hard for people to envision an outcome and say, I need to take this step now to prevent that in the future. So I think human beings have a lot of difficulty with that. And so, and also we tend to, or in some, I'm not going to group, but there can be a tendency to focus on ourselves as being the be all end all. And when we do that, we lose a huge knowledge source and knowledge base. And we can easily drive ourselves and the world into extinction because the narrowness of the focus. And so for me, it's all very interconnected and my thing now with people who say, oh, I can't wait till 2020 is over. I understand that statement because 2020 has been a really hard year. I understand that, but it's not a fluky 2020 year thing. It's not that 2020 is at fault for being an abnormally strange and unusual year. It's the natural progression of where the trajectory we're on. And we should anticipate more 2020s. And we should not talk, in my mind, about, oh, I can't wait till 2020 is over. How we should be talking is, oh my eyes are opened now, if they haven't been before. This is really a result of our actions on the earth, that we need to take dramatic steps now to change. And we really need to buckle down, because this is not good. Feeling like this and doing this is not good. So we need to act and take specific actions in concert, in mass, to turn this around, or at least stabilize it. And that we know now these things are happening. We have cognizance of them, and we are going to therefore address them, and not wait magically for 2021 as if 2020 was just a bad year. And I think, in terms of pandemics, there's nothing to say, number one, that COVID-19 is over. There's nothing to say, number two, that there isn't a COVID-20 hanging out there. I mean, and that they can't happen simultaneously. I'm just saying that's reality. I'm not trying to paint a doomsday, but we need to wake up to reality, and we need to address the threats we have helped create on the earth, and take action and talk about it in ways that are meaningful. And I know people will talk socially and just chit chat, right? That's the way things are. But I think that should be really, people need to talk carefully and talk in ways that bring people toward knowledge, and really establish that they are thinking about things deeper than just it being a fluke. And the ways we talk about things influence other people. So I think we need to pause and think very deeply about the pandemic, what opportunities it brings to us to become enlightened, so to speak, about our current situation, and what we can do in our lives to make a difference. Now, again, it goes back to, people will go, oh, it's too overwhelming. I can't do anything. And well, maybe you can't. And maybe the earth is heading off a cliff. Maybe worst case scenario. But how are you going to live your life? I mean, what's the bottom line? What's your life about? And even if you live it and the outcome is not the best, you've lived it in a way that's contributed to trying to make it better. And that's all, to me, you can say about life. And that's what keeps me going, because I just have to throw aside, because if I listen to the news or I listen to people's viewpoints, which sometimes to me can seem very narrow and very much not addressing the reality we're in, that can be very depressing. And I can say, oh my, with so many people or so much going on, there's no way we're ever going to make this or that happen. And okay, I have to just let that go. Not to say I let go the reality I'm in, but I have to let go the mindset that all of that is going to impact the way I live my life. And if you focus then on what you do and what your choices are and how you care for others and yourself and the earth, very meaningful actions, your life will have meaning. And at the end of the day, that's what's important. And so that's how I see the pandemic, as something that I have found a lot of personal growth. And I can't say that I like this situation at all, especially for everybody who's suffering so immensely around the globe. And And I really get down when I listen a lot to the news and such. So part of me has taken steps to minimize the negativity in my life. I know the situation. I keep abreast of things that keep me informed, but I'm not going to sit and listen to ranting or anything that just is a negative drawdown, negative just sinkhole. And I'm going to instead focus on what I'm doing with my life and how I'm contributing. And that is much more healthy for me, I've found, to do. And in that, I've found a lot of growth. And I think it's, there's been opportunities that open up when your mind is not closed in on itself, just with all this worry, that you can open up to other people, find networks of people that are very amazing and positive and inspiring. One thing I've done, I actually lost my job at the beginning of the pandemic because there was poor prevention of infection at the workplace. And I actually stood up against that. And that standing up was not as appreciated. I mean, I did it in a very polite way, but I think all the issues of the times were actually quite astonishing and quite disheartening. So my position that I had done for 10 years ended, and I had to decide what I was going to do. But there were all these people, you know, talking about, oh, you know, you have the right to sue, and you can do all this litigation stuff. You can, you know, just dwelling on that problem that really was already past. And yes, it was a big problem, but I tried to take action to not attack, but to raise the issue to higher levels so that people could be dealt with in a way that was safe and more appropriate in the workplace and also had more justice. And I just elevated that whole discussion to try to do that. That was the action I took around that. And then I just turned and I said, all right, time to turn and focus on things that are very important and I can do. So now I'm a consultant in the environmental arena. I worked hard to reach out to a lot of different folks and trying to establish a way for me to contribute in that way. But I was very fortunate, feel very privileged to be able to do it, and it's very gratifying. But in that process of being freed up, so to speak, from the job I had had for 10 years and that had dedicated quite a bit of time in my week to, even though it was part-time, it still ate up a lot of time. Now I was freed up to really champion the things like the environment that I had wanted to do and felt I was doing, but I really couldn't focus. So now that I am freed up in that way, I'm able to focus, and it actually pointed me to a fantastic online training program. First time it was online, and the first time it was global. And I'll give a plug for it. It was the Climate Reality Leadership Core training. And I said, wow, this looks perfect, because I was starting this job and working with environment stuff. And I said, I want to be as trained up as I can be. So I signed up. And talk about inspirational. I mean, there were 10,000 people from around the world signed up for this training. And each one, I mean, I looked at a lot of people's stories or bios that they put up to introduce themselves. Just amazing people, amazing work, amazing dedication to helping the environment, helping people, helping the earth, you know, standing up against the threats that we're having to the environment with very creative and innovative ways, and a lot of work and a lot of passion and just wonderful, exciting people from all areas, the arts, journalism, business, science, medicine, everything, environmental, wildlife conservationists, everything. So it was just a wonderful thing that I might have missed. Let's just say that, because I was intensively looking and I found this and I did it. And then from that, oh my goodness, there's this hub where you connect with people all over the world. And we 10,000 are added to the pre-existing almost, I think, 15,000 who'd been trained. And then there's another probable 10,000 being trained in August. So, and this is another thing the pandemic did. They had been having conferences around the world and doing the trainings at cities, and people had to fly in there and attend, and which is all great. I mean, there's nothing wrong with seeing people, hugging people, and doing things in person. But no travel, no air pollution from that, a lot of cost savings, and literally 10,000 people, which you would not have had in the event in City X, for example. So unbelievable opportunity to just open up a ton of horizons and ways to connect and work. And I've had fantastic conversations with people around the world, and your mind just goes with all sorts of ideas. And having the compassionate city component, there's so many ways to connect that, because this training, also there's climate reality chapters in cities, as you might imagine. So I'm connecting now with the Climate Reality Austin chapter and the Climate Reality San Antonio chapter, and there's many, many others, but very exciting work, and it will just get better because the people are dedicated, and we're all talking to each other, and we're all inspiring each other. So it's local to global action, and I just think, that's amazing. I've benefited so much from that. And so that's a way that the pandemic has really opened my eyes and enabled me to connect with very many, many inspirational people that I would never have had the opportunity or maybe the attention to find ways to meet. And the other thing is, internally, it has been very much of a growth time, because for my own sort of stress relief, I guess, and I've always done this, but this was a little bit more obvious of a stress relief. I'd go outside to walk, or, and so attuning your senses to everything around you, and nature has always been a wonderful thing for me. And it's always really been freeing up of my mind, and the connectivity with nature is very, very important to me. That feeling of being one with it all, and the inspiration you can get from that connection, the inspiration you can get from another living thing, be it a tree or animal, or even the sensation of the water in the air, all of that is very powerful. And I think I've become very much more attuned and had so much more of a connection, strengthened, let's just say, strengthened with that as being almost like the life giver. So I find very much strength in that total feeling of communication with nature. It's so important to me. And in that, I've done also Kung Fu and Tai Chi for almost 20 years, and have a wonderful community there, here in Austin, and actually nationally, and probably some global, but anyway, at least nationally. And that community has strengthened online, interestingly. And we also, the depth of the whole art, Kung Fu, of course, is the external expression, Tai Chi being the internal. And for me, Tai Chi has been very enriching and deeper. And that whole thought of how breath and connectivity and how you relate to the moment and how you relate to time and your space around you and how you flow with that. That is amazing. And I've just seen connections I've never experienced. And so much of it's the part of trying to understand nature, trying to understand the internal flow of energy and how all that connects. And there's such ancient truth there that has been passed down over the years from many, many people who've studied that so deeply. And to have just the tiniest inkling of insight into that is just miraculous. So I have found that extremely life-giving, I guess is a good term for it, but it's very meaningful. And I feel like I have grown immensely from it, but there's so much more to learn. It opens a window for you to go explore, and your life becomes almost this amazing exploration that, you know, circumstances can really hit you hard, but I think sometimes you have to have that internal strength to get through them. And how do you gain that? And what tools do you have to try to gain that? And then what's your reference point of the here and now to the future and time, the endless time? And what does your life translate into? And how is that energy expressed? And so in my readings, for some reason, there's been just sort of this coming together recently that I found very intriguing and just wonderful. So I must say I have not had to experience the depth of hardship of many in these times. Hopefully some of the work that it goes on with some of the sort of the efforts has been helpful in that regard to others. But I think, so had I had just no food on the table, had I been ill, you know, in an ICU, or had I been at the bedside or not at the bedside of some loved one dying, that world of growth or perspective would be altered dramatically. But I think, so in some ways, I'm very privileged to be able to even speak about some of the ways I've been able to have a growth experience. But on the other hand, I think even those kinds of experiences of intense hardship, typically they bring a depth of their own into your life experience. And there is a searching during those times for what is life all about, how am I connected to other people, if at all, am I alone, how is my energy going to keep going if it does. So those questions are there, and I think it's at those critical moments. I've always found that in my life, that I like talking to people and experiencing people on that brink, because that's when they're most themselves, because they're grappling with things. And so I think it's a time that if we can pull together and help each other and really focus on keeping our home, our earth, our nature healthy as it can be, we can move through it and see some glimpses of the depth of who we are and how important that is, and how what we do matters. So that's pretty much where I am these days.
Lesa, it is so amazing to listen to you. You reminded me of some of the books I used to read a long time ago and also more recently. Remember Fritz of Capra? Among other things, he talked about the Tower of Physics, but there was a lesser known book, The Web of Life, way back, probably in the 1980s. And it really changed the way I thought about life itself. we tend to look at life more from a, what do you call, anthropomorphic human perspective. And you, having worked in public health, have been looking at the web of life literally, not just life itself as the life of plants and animals. There's another book that reminds me of The Secret Life of Plants, The Secret Life of Forests. And but one step further, you're talking about the five elements, whether it's water
Yes.
or
Yes.
you're talking about things that Eastern religions, if for
Yes.
lack of a better word, like the
Yes.
Tai Chi and the whole. It's almost like we have compassion in action. What I see you practicing is Tai Chi in action.
Yeah.
Reverence,
Well, hopefully.
literally reverence for every one of those elements, whether it's water, earth, the fire, or the energy, and reverence for space, and reference for air, and making sure that the climate that we can, in our own little ways, affect or we can be instruments of peace, not only internally or externally, but also in the global environment. It's like being climate warriors and amazing work. I mean, I'm going to go and find it and start signing up because it wasn't until 3 years ago that I started realizing the importance of sustainability of the environment closely linked with sustainability of life itself.
Oh
It
yeah.
took me a long time to understand, connect the dots. I was so, my own life was more anthropomorphic. I was all focused on we, the humans. We're just part of nature, and
Yes.
your work is demonstrating that in many different ways.
And sometimes we are not the smartest ones. I mean, we need to learn and listen, like you are talking about here. I'm reading an interesting book called Overstory about trees,
Oh,
but it's got a grouping of sort of short story fiction, but it's all ways of looking at life and the connection with trees of some sort. It's interesting. Some of the stories I'm not so hot on. Some of the ones I really like. But the first story captured me because, and there's one I'm reading. One of the ones I'm making my way through the book, but one of the ones now is that way too, because that was where that glimpse came. It was sort of like the Tai Chi that I'm focusing a lot on in learning. I mean, I'm constantly learning. That's a lifelong learning thing. In the elements, it all of a sudden, all those elements and the Tai Chi rose up out of this book about the tree. And I thought, oh my goodness, because the tree had all the elements, and and so for a minute, because when I run or jog or walk or something, like I say, I love not having music in or anything. I'm trying to just be with what's around me and appreciate it and just connect with it. But my mind tends to just be freed up. And I think of things I never would think of when I'm focused in on something else. But all of that sensation, and when I pass by trees and recognizing them and their relevance, and that chapter in the book and the Tai Chi, all of a sudden it just kind of went, and the elements, I got all of a sudden kind of went whoosh, and I had this little glimpse where I thought, oh, and then it sort of disappeared. I went, oh, I need to hang on to that. But it was fascinating because it's like a window into something that was revelationary. It was just, whoa, okay, what? Because it all came together in a very just beautiful way. And so if you look at what's happened, what's another interesting thing that kind of talks about this in a sort of in an analogy would be the current state of the burning of the redwoods.
yeah, in California.
Well, there's been
like half a mile from one of my homes in Santa Cruz, literally half a mile away. And 4 years ago, I had that experience in Woodside when we had a home in Woodside, up in the mountains, on Skyline, right above Stanford. We had a fire half a mile away, and my son was fast asleep, and I had this
Ooh,
thought that I should take care of the documents. And my wife called from India. She said, "No, no, no, forget the documents. You and my son need to get out of there.
yeah.
Just get into safe, because it can start a stampede at the last minute, because it's hard to go through these mountain roads." And thank you for reminding us that the fires in California are not a distinctly different experience from the pandemic. They're all related to
Oh yeah,
our
oh yeah, they're
atmosphere.
all connected with the Earth issues, the climate issues. But what I read an article though recently, and the people who study the redwoods, of course, are saying, well, they look like they're charred. And I mean, it went through a whole park, I think 16,000, some huge number of acres. I don't know, I can't rattle it
Yeah,
off. But
I heard
anyway,
it's like
have been
70,000.
burned,
Yeah.
have been burned. But the point of the article was these redwoods look like they're blackened and charred, but they're going to survive, most of them. And the fascinating thing is what incredible beings they are, because they've been here for eons and they've seen so many things, and they've been, yeah, and so they have this, he was this marveling at the structure of the tree that enabled it to withstand all this stuff. And of course, he did mention that, our heat is escalating and the fires are burning more intensely than they've ever done before. So it's not like we're on a happy-go-lucky, the trees will live no matter what. But the whole story of the trees is just fascinating. And as you learn more about them, they're a whole world in and of themselves that we don't know, don't really, well, we think we understand, but we're not living it. And they're amazing. And so anyway, when I was reading about them and the whole thing with the burning of them and now their resilience to that, and then all this chapter in the Tai Chi was just like, wow. Okay, it's pretty amazing.
In fact, when we lived my wife and I lived in the Redwoods for 4 years in Woodside on Berkeley Trail, to be more specific. And I had this experience. I didn't do that until I lived in a redwood forest, what they call forest immersion or basking. What do you call it? Just basking in
Forest
the redwood.
bathing or something?
Yes, yes, forest bathing. And I did not even know that term. But when you're in the redwoods, you have no choice but to be with the redwoods. And I used to do open-eyed meditation instead of the closed-eyed, like trying to tune out of the world, be like soak in the redwoods. And one of the times I had this surreal experience, which now is turning out to be real, which is the trees told me, "You guys think you have all the technology in the world, but you haven't yet figured out how to live more than 100 years. The longest a human being has lived, probably historically recorded, not even 125 years, right? And like, we know how to live for 10,000 years. Have you thought about that?" And I was like, you know what? This tree's almost yelling at me, and it's true. They've figured out how to live through droughts, through floods, through fires. And if you know the way the secret life of trees, they communicate through the roots, their
Yes,
brains are in the
yes,
roots. They actually
yes.
talk to each other when a fire is coming. Like the mother, which is usually the oldest tree, tells the little kids, "Okay, guys, sorry, we can't save you, but we can save you guys. So bring all the water here and take care of." They are so smart. And the
Yes,
trees are
they
not
help each
separate, they're just
other. Yeah, they
forest.
help each other and they do,
Yeah,
it's
they
amazing.
cooperate. And they even cooperate along with the, what do you call, the fungi and the algae and all
Yes,
there's a whole undercurrent. It's not just the redwoods. Just like we have
yes,
our dogs and cats, they have their little plants that they cooperate with, and the what do you call, the saprophytes, the fungi and
yeah.
all. They're already talking to them and are like, "Okay, guys, I'm sorry, but we can't save you, but we can save these guys. Is that okay?" And all the water gets shifted, and so through hundreds of such fires, they've lived through all that. So
And they
much.
just,
It's a
and they're
human.
there. I mean, they're not like they're moving around, able to avoid things.
They're
So
not
they have
running
to
away.
prepare. They're the most prevention minded. I tell you, that's their secret. They prepare and they grow and they evolve and they adapt. And we have to learn some mighty lessons.
Another lesson I learned again was that the redwoods are really interesting about this. So, it would rain really hard at night, and then early morning it's all bright and chirpy. So I'd start walking, and suddenly I would get this rain from a redwood. Like, where did that come from? Okay, the redwood is shedding water, but it doesn't just throw away the water, it recycles the water so that it goes back to the roots. So it keeps the water it needs to keep and keeps things in the reserve. It's almost like they've figured out. We have our, what do you call? We have our water reservoirs. We have our reservoirs in
Yes.
tanks and lakes, and we have reservoirs in those what do you call? We store up water up there.
Okay.
They actually do that. They're so smart about it. So when they need the water, especially in summer, they store it up. Or they store it up throughout the rainy season. But when they think the roots need water, they'll dump the water from this. And it's really intelligent behavior.
Oh,
We,
yeah.
we have a reduction. I'm sorry to say this, but we human beings have a very reductionist views of plants being not really alive. They're just going by the laws of physics, gravity. No, no, no. They know what they're doing. There's a innate knowing, and we see that in the way they communicate with each other, the way they transfer the water, the way they inform each other, you know and
Yeah.
we do the same thing. We are also governed by the exact same laws of physics. The gymnast is the same physics. And I'm sorry, but I have learned so much just being with the trees, and I miss them. I really miss them. I'm now in a
It is
concrete jungle in
amazing.
India.
It is very amazing. So there's a lot for us to learn, and I think you can pull strength from that in tough times too. The resilience and just the strength of nature can help you, and got to decide. Your choices are important of what you decide to do each day, and so it's a decision of being helpful or destructive, or the weighing of that. I mean, we all have our elements of that, but it's trying to weigh that and become more helpful than you are destructive.
Well, I'm really fascinated. This is the first time I'm talking to you. I've talked to more than 100 people, but the relationship between nature or Mother Earth and our inner nature or physical health inside our body and the health of other beings around us, whether it's humans or it's people from anywhere on earth, not just from our nation, but also not just from our city, but how it's interrelated to other cities, and also with all forms of life, whether it's human life, animal life, plant life, the life of fungi, and the life of microbes. Corona is also part of that equation. We cannot just isolate and say, get rid of coronavirus because they will mutate. They're not going to run away. We've had
Right.
many, many mutations already. This is neither the first nor the last coronavirus. It's been around, I think it was first detected in the 1920s, correct me if I'm wrong. So what do you think, just specifically talking about the pandemic, we've had at least 28 variations of coronavirus, isn't it? In just the last few years, that's what I keep hearing. Is that true?
Oh, I'm not probably the best one on that. I am not poring over all the literature on the COVID. I mean, I know the basics of what we're dealing with in terms of how to try to keep yourself safe and all that, but I haven't been poring through that as much. But so you may know more than I do on that one.
No, I'm just reading. When I was
No, I really haven't been focusing on the well, my work that I'm doing currently is looking at environmental issues such as air pollution and how that impacts health, specifically, you know, asthma and all sorts of cardiovascular issues and things like that. And of course, makes you more susceptible and have more difficulty with viruses that impact breathing, COVID-19 and other influenza type things. So I think it is, again, all connected. And but that's where I'm focusing a little bit more of the public health side of me. And there is some work, obviously, at the interface of these, what you call it, environmental hazards that we live in. And the whole thing that's also important is environmental justice, because the threats and the difficulties we're having with environmental issues are far worse in areas that have had less economic support capabilities. People live in with less resources, marginalized communities. Those folks are suffering much more from COVID, as we know, but also much more from air pollution and the kinds of things which are very detrimental to health. So in the way if I were to say what I would like to focus on in the environment, for me, it's of course addressing global warming, which is so critical, but environmental justice is huge. And that goes hand in hand with what people would describe as social justice. But it's tacking on that knowledge base that sometimes people forget, or at least they're maybe now discovering more, is how, you know, we talk about just like threats from a virus, you have threats from air pollution. And that's doing a lot of damage, and it's not that well known. So we are under significant, I mean, if people could put a label on air pollutants in a way that made people think of them almost like a virus, I mean, you'd probably make more headway trying to get people to understand it. But it's there, and unseen, typically. Chemicals are in the air, and you might smell something, it might not, you know, but you still go on. But it's having an impact on your health. And so people just really need to read and learn and become educated about what's going on with the environment and how we have to act in concert now. And some people phrase it in terms like it's almost like rallying in a war effort, which is sad to say that that's how people equate rallying. Has to be a war for people to rally together, and it's unbelievable. But anyway, somehow we can rally, because again, I think that goes to the fact that people don't act till they're hit in the face. I mean, they have to have it hit them in the face. And then often something gets so bad that people have a war or whatever they do to react to that. And then that's when somehow people come together, when they could come together in peace and not have a war, but tackle the situation as if they're mobilizing to address a threat, which they are. You know, it's mind-boggling to me how the human brain kind of functions in a more, unfortunately, less productive and more destructive way. Prevention is so key, and we have such a hard time grappling with it. So if we could rally now with the effort and mobility we're having to some degree around the virus, I mean, that's even lacking, but at least people are more globally attuned to that than most anything else in terms of a threat. That's the same threat we're having, if not worse, from the environment. In fact, that's caused by environmental concerns and people moving into habitats that are new and strange and getting viruses from animals and such that they're not in contact with normally. So anyway, I hope that at least each of us maybe individually can mobilize. And the more people see that, that makes an impact. I think you live your life and you do model and you do show people, and by your words and actions, you do show what's important. And if you've got some integrity to you, hopefully people see that and see that that's a good thing and rally around that. Because we need such a mass effort. We need a huge global mobilization, huge. It'll take leadership from the top, but it also takes grassroots, people just willing to change their lifestyles. My concern is we've all changed our lifestyles to a degree, right?
Yeah.
We aren't trying to do quite so much. We're cutting back on emissions and things like that just because we're forced to. We're not buying, and maybe that's bad for the economy, but what we need are jobs and ways to build a sustainable economy, not an economy built around destroying the environment. And so we have to do some massive and difficult changes, but we need to have leadership to create those opportunities for people to move into those jobs with the skills they have and to grow new skills as needed to address them. And then really be willing to live in ways differently. And I just had a funny thought. I was out trying to go up and get something from a pharmacy, and I was in the parking lot, and I usually used to go there to get a treat. I wouldn't get it every day. I get it maybe once a week of a chai tea latte or something. And at a neighbor, a close by little coffee shop. And I thought to myself, I haven't had that in ages. I mean, I haven't had it. And I used to just love to kind of treat myself to that once a week, just for sort of like a candy, you have something nice. But I know in my mind I was craving it. I was saying, oh, I miss that. I miss that chai tea. Oh, and there's nothing wrong with it. But on the other hand, we don't have to live the same way. But what's fascinating to me is how addicted we are to our habits, to what we think is essential, which it's not. And this has been a period of time to sort of go cold turkey on some things. But it's going to be really easy once that world offers you that stuff again that you crave, not for any real meaningful reason, but you crave it nonetheless. It's going to be very difficult not to go back, and not to go back in a force that's even more than you had when you without this withdrawal, so to speak. So we're all addicted. We're addicted to lifestyles that are more destructive than not. And even as best we'd like to live, each of us could look deeply and find there's lots of ways we can improve to help the environment and how we live. But it's not easy. It's very hard, and we're stressed. And so old habits are hard to break. Old addictions will resurface. So we've really got to pull together to be able to not fall back into lifestyles like that. And that's the will of humanity. Do we have the will to do it? Do we have the strength to do that? That's the big question. I hope we do, but it's going to be hard.
Yeah, and I totally appreciate that you're being realistic. You're not just giving a nice optimistic picture. We have to be asking these hard questions and answering them for ourselves. Not even saying the government is not doing it or the other guys are not doing it, because there's no other. Charity has to begin from home, and our connection to the earth, to each other, has to start here, honestly. It's very easy to, we are all in this blame game many times. But if each one of us takes that decision that I will take care to make sure, somebody said that if 50 years ago, for all we had even more dangerous viruses, but the air was cleaner. And we didn't have that susceptibility in our lungs because of that. And for all you know, there were more dangerous viruses, and we survived through all that. And those viruses became a part of the flora and fauna, and we all lived together. Today, we're much more susceptible because there are more antigen, all kinds of things in there. There are more, carcinogens. But our bodies have become weaker or more used to the pollution, and therefore our sustainability is actually at question now. There's no way to prove or disprove, but you have been studying all this, and you know what it's like today, the humans that
What
we
we
are
eat,
now.
what we eat, our digestive tract, how healthy that is, it's a huge issue on how resilient we might be to illness. And so there's so many, but I think if you're working on things, trying, you shouldn't beat yourself up because you're not living a perfect life and doing everything just so. But on the other hand, there should be an attempt to be learning and trying to strive to improve and do better and make those changes, because we'll all be wishing we had, and that's not a good place to be. And now we're even wishing we had done things differently just with this pandemic alone. And look at the deaths. And that's unfortunately going to get worse if we kind of stick our heads in the sand and don't start acting differently as people as a whole. I mean, we each individually can do what we do, but we have to do it in mass. And I think it's also very important for support structures, because again, I have tried to resist or move away from negativity inputs and focus on things that are more positive and moving, I think, me and the world forward in a better way, less destructive way, a more inspiring way. Because we need those supports. And if you take the situation of a person who's addicted to drugs, they can go through a withdrawal and be okay, and they're in an environment that's supportive and that they're doing well, but then they go back and to quote the real world or the neighborhood or wherever. And oftentimes if they don't change that environment, they will be again brought backwards by people who are sort of trying to motivate them back into their old habits. So what you need is to move into a arena for yourself that is very supportive of the positive way you're moving or trying to move in your life. And not to say you cut people off, but there has to be a balance, because if you are overwhelmed with that difficulty, that adds stress. And what we tend to do when we're stressed is fall back into old habits. And what I found, for example, is you think about recycling as an issue. When I am very tired at the end of a 14-hour day or something, and you drag yourself home, and there's the choice of washing something out, drying it, getting it in the recycle. I mean, it's just, those are simple things, but they're tasks on top of everything else, and you're already stressed. There's a real easy tendency to just throw the thing away in the easy disposable, whatever, without out of sight, out of mind. And so that's where community support and is very important to sustainability of habits that are good and to sustainability for our world. So
Yeah, much to learn. In fact, you're reminding me of balance in Tai Chi, the yin and the
yes,
yang. It's easy to drift on one extreme or the other, but what we are looking for is balance, the inside and the outside, for lack of a better word, the masculine and the feminine, or the receptive and the, being and doing, action and acceptance, even rebellion, if you will, the rallying, as you are saying. It is necessary sometimes to protest. It is necessary sometimes to be pro-social. So finding that balance is a dynamic thing. It's not a static thing, right?
Yeah, and you know that's where the tree comes back. And in this first chapter, the tree, you know, for example, in Tai Chi, some of the exercises, you're drawing yang energy from the air into your body. You're drawing yin energy from the earth into your body. So think of what the tree does, and it's just very fascinating. And it is very alive and moving and balanced, though, between air and earth. And so yes, balance is very important to health. And any extreme sort of situation, and you're probably bordering on trouble, because you always have to look for that balance. So yeah, I love, that's another thing that resonated in that first chapter of the Overstory book. It all came together because there was the exercises I was doing in Tai Chi, and there was the tree drawing from the air and the earth, and I was like, oh, fantastic.
Well, you know, it's just been a fascinating conversation, and I'm glad we don't put time limits, because there's so much to talk about these things. And for those who are still with us, if you need to know more, we will provide the links, both to the things that Dr. Lesa Walker referred to, as well as to my links. So you can directly access that information. And if I'm sure there are some social media links to you, Dr. Walker, that people can access if they want to reach out to you as well. The whole idea is that we have to find a way to share with each other. And if you have any questions, comments, you want to tell us more, please reach out. And this is what this whole thing is about, to learn from each other. We're not just throwing information at each other, but we're learning with each other. So thank you again, and really appreciate it. It's been a long time, Lesa. We should not be strangers for so long again. And
it's so good to see you, and thank you for inviting me to this project. It sounds wonderful. I can't wait to hear all the voices and the perspectives, and thank you for your work. You've brought such goodness into the world, and keep doing what you're doing. I appreciate you.
Thank you, and it's a blessing. Honestly, it's a blessing to be able to do this. It's a luxury. It's a privilege, as you said.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.